So we are, the best that I can recall, just below the middle of the page on page Dalet. And the line starts with the word kulhi.
Basically.
Right?
Yeah, drop further, but
Is that what?
a little further. Not sure exactly where, but I wrote down some thing on the next line.
So, the union from Shem Havaya. The Shem Havaya is called the Shem Ha'etzem. And we have pointed out that there are two levels that are properly called Shem Havaya. The first one is the original Rotzen, Lahavis, Rotzen to for creation. This is called Shem Havaya because this is where the principle of creation is first introduced and decided on. And then there is Shem Havaya that from this, because of this Rotzen, there was a tzimtzum in order to facilitate the creation. And thank you. And then after that came what's called the second level of Shem Havaya. This is the Shem Havaya that has already, this is the Oir Lifa, the functioning element of the Oir. But this Oir is also called Shem Ha'etzem. Because even though it went through a tzimtzum, and it's only the functional element, but in fact, it is connected and reflecting the original Shem Havaya that's in the Rotz. And it came out because of that Rotz. It is actually representative of the Rotz. Therefore, it also represents Ayin Etzem, Shem Ha'etzem. In order to understand this a little bit better, it should not remain, so to speak, just in words. The term Shem Ha'etzem is to denote something that is actually describing the very essence itself. That's means Shem Ha'etzem. Now, just as the original Rotzen, the Rotzen to create, as we discussed it, as I remember, the original Rotzen to create did not come through some kind of external stimulus. It was a Rotzen that reflected the Etzem, the Rotzen Atzmi, that it's Atzmos there was this Rotzen. It was originated within the Etzem itself. This is called Rotzen Atzmi. Therefore, when this Rotzen goes through the process of a tzimtzum, and there is the oir that has the functioning element of that Rotzen, it is still reflective of the same etzem. It is still an etzem element. The best way to recognize this principle is as follows. What we discussed many times about the human being. We use the simplest element of the human principles of intellect, such as how you're supposed to eat, right? You're supposed to eat like a human being, right? Not put your face in the food, but lift it up neatly and put it in your mouth. Now, this system, I don't understand, this system can be explained entirely externally. Meaning to say, to eat this way is simply more efficient. Practically more efficient. You won't get your clothes dirty. And you have, so to speak, a bite-sized food going into your mouth instead of taking in water and spitting it out. It's pre-measured for you. It's practically very efficient. So if we would be doing this exclusively because of its efficiency or because of the practical convenience, then this would be just an external action. But we are saying, no, that's not the case. Yes, it is efficient. But the real reason why that which is efficient and that which is neat fits us, we do it not because of its benefits, but because it suits our psyche. As a human being, this is the only way I can do things. When I don't do it this way, I feel that I'm not acting like a human being. You understand? It's not for the benefit of the efficiency, not for the external benefit. Therefore, even though it is efficient, an external act, still it can be called an act that is reflective of the etzem of the human being. Although it is on a functional and external level. So similarly, this thing of Shem Havaya being Shem Ha'etzem, after the Tzimtzum, and it's already, a functional oir, but it's still reflective of the Etzem because the whole unit to create is something which is a desire from the Etzem. Therefore, this is just following through on that desire. And it fits very well with the essence. Okay? You understand that? Okay. Okay, Harei the Iker Hamoker, unless you thought maybe I'm talking about a higher, Kuli Harei the Iker Hamoker, okay, a little bit below the middle page, right? Harei, thus we see, from this discussion, the Yiker HaMokoir Hu Bechinas Orotzen She'olav B'Atzmus, that the principal source of creation is this Rotzen that was part of the Etzem. V'Hashem Havaya Shebo Begilui B'Hishtalshelus, and then the Shem Havaya that comes B'Hishtalshelus, and it is Begilui, Hu Shenimshach Mehelem El Hagilui Levad. That Shem Havaya is not a new thing. It is actually representative of the Helem, the way it is in the Etzem, and therefore it's called Shemo Etzem. V'Hainu K'meshen Yisbo Eliyil, which means, as we explained before, the Gam K'moi Shehu Liachar HaTzimtzum, that this Shem Havaya, even as it is in the state after the tzimtzum, and it is already a mitzius, it is still connected to its source, and it is it is reflective of its source. This is what we just now finished discussing the Moshe. This is why it's called Shem Ha'etzem. Nothing there's no novel element in it, elo except mashehu bechinas oil lifil pu'ulas ha'izhavus bepoil. The hischatshus, the novel element is the emphasis on hischatshus over here. He repeats many times the word hischatshus. Etzem is the original source. This is the original essence. Anything that is nischadish means that this is something which is external. It's not etzem. So Shem Havaya also there is hischatshus. Therefore it's not etzem. So we're pointing out that the hischatshus in Shem Havaya is not a real hischatshus. It is only that this which was concealed is now revealed. But it's not a new thing. Like I explained before, that the eating habit is not created externally, like a dover chodesh, because of circumstantial convenience. But it is something which is drawn from the inside, from the essence. Therefore, it's not a chidush. You understand? In other words, if one would forget about efficiency and everything else, if one would understand the psyche and the principles of the human being, well, and you would try to see, okay, how should this human being eat soup? He would say, oh, the only way he can eat soup is by using a spoon to feed himself. In other words, this would be a reflection of his etzem. Mm-hmm. See, we have a welcoming committee. We have a welcoming committee. He's got a copy ready for you.
So behind you,
What? Yeah.
actually, we're two lines down in the beginning.
Umeshum zeh. Okay, the line begins with Umeshum zeh. Umeshum zeh nikra ha'ora nivdeles. For this reason, the Shem Havaya after the Tzimtzum is referred to as ha'ora nivdeles. A ha'ora that is separate from its source. Because it is now in a state of external action. V'nimtzo. Thus it comes out. That the principal mokor, the principal source of the creation is the fact that all of Yitzoyne, that he wanted to create. Ukiodua, and as it is known in Chassidus, the Keser Nikra Mokoir, that the Keser, which is the Rotzoin, is called a Mokoir, a source. And that is the Iker HaMokoir of the creation. Elo except, She'iev Shel Likrois as Bechinas HaRotzin HaPoshut, Hanal. It's not possible to refer to call the Rotzin HaPoshut, B'Shem Moker Mamosh La'oilamos. We can't call it as an actual source for the worlds, because the Moker Mamosh because the real Moker and actual Moker is only Sheba Begilui Be'efen, that it comes in revealed ways. Be'efen in a manner she'efsher li yois mimenu his havus mamash. from which it is possible that there should be an actual hishabus. I'm going to finish another 2 lines and then we'll again discuss it. Moker can only be called that which is from which the hishabus can actually occur. Or kmei mayon, just like a wellspring, a spring of water. Shenikra moker lenohar. The mayon is called the moker for the nohar, a source for the river. Why? Because harehu ba begilui. Because the mayon is actually expressing itself revealed in it actually speaking about someone saying what this moker is. She'ef sheli is mimenu mitzias hanor, from which the whole mitzius, the whole presence of the river is possible. Okay, so we want to understand these words. Here we're saying that the Iker Moker is the Rotzen, and yet we can't call it a Moker. What are we talking about? What is this involvement?
It's saying that Kesser and the Ratzon HaPashut is the same exact thing? Is that what it's saying here?
Right.
Okay.
But let's first understand the principles. The Rebbe says a mayon, a spring, that can be properly referred to as the moker lenohar, the moker for the river. Well, that's obvious. There is water sprinkling up there. What is the nuance? What is the insight? What is the chokhmah in this? This mayon, this spring water, is only a blurb of water from underneath the ground. There is water flowing, there are water veins under the ground everywhere. Water flows under the ground everywhere, all the time. That's the real reservoir of water. So if the Mayim produces water to create a river, it is because there is this reservoir of water underneath the ground. Not only that, why does the Mayim, how the Mayim comes out? The Mayim is a blurb, it like perks up water because there is a pressure from underneath to perk up, and the pressure is one perk at a time. This pressure comes from underneath. There's no external pump that pulls the water out. It comes from underneath the ground. That it perks it out, it pushes it out. So therefore the real source of the river is the water that flows underneath the ground. That's where the water is coming from. Yet, we are saying, for proper description, we cannot call the water that's flowing under the ground as the source for the river.
You're saying it's a source and it's not the source?
Right.
At the same time, both?
Well, that's what we're saying, right? Ratzon is the source of the creation, but it's not the source. We cannot be called a mocker because the word mocker, this is what the Rebbe is laboring, trying for us to understand what we mean, the terminology. The word mocker. So we have the moshel of the Mayim. The Mayim, of course, it creates the river. But where does the Mayim get its water from? From underneath the ground. Now, the water that's underneath the ground is really the real reservoir, the real source of water in the river. But the water under the ground Why is there water under the ground? Is it to create the river? The water that flows under the ground, this is part of the structure of the earth. This water keeps the earth alive, keeps the earth moist. This is part of the richness of the earth. This is why there is grass growing everywhere, because deep down there is water flowing. You understand what I'm saying? Huh?
Yeah.
This water is not aimed at creating the river. Yet, the river gets its water from that water. The reason there is water flowing on top of the ground is because there is water flowing underneath the ground. So this is the original, we can call original source. But the functional source of the river is not that water. That water is, so to speak, is not involved in creating the river. It's involved in having water for the earth. The earth has water. And where does the river concept come up? When the spring begins to perk. You understand? When that water, which is underneath the ground, begins to express itself, to reveal itself through the spring, that's when the river begins to, the idea of creating a river begins to formulate. So that a mokir means something that actually can relate to the thing that it's creating. And the water that's perking out is water in actual on the surface of the earth, and therefore that can actually result in a river. The water that's underneath the ground is the same water, but it's not on the surface. That water has a completely different function than creating a river. Its function is to keep the earth moist.
Isn't creating a river and keeping the earth moist the same thing? What's the river for? Keeping the earth moist also. Maybe. I don't know. Just spreading out outside instead of spreading out inside.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I mean, besides the other functions it has, but it's still doing that also.
The river is is an actual flow of water on the surface of the earth. Okay, this is not part of the texture of earth. Texture of earth is separate. Forget there's a separation between the river and the earth, and the river flows on top of the earth. The water that's underneath the ground, this is part of the texture, part of the structure of the earth itself. It has all kinds of different purposes, but all its purposes is to define what is earth. The river is not to define what is earth. The river is to define what is river, what is water. You follow what I'm saying? Menachem?
You just need to, I missed it. You said it, I got it, and then when you said that the water as it is on the ground, it's makar.
Is what?
It's makar, it's a source. And then when it goes out, it's not functioning there, but when it goes out and it starts affecting the grass, and then when it starts sprouting, when it comes out, that's when it becomes functioning.
I'm talking about what can be properly called the mokir for the river water.
So what is it?
What is it?
Is it the sprout that comes out?
So we're saying that right. the proper the description, how it's a proper name, where is the name Moker for the river applicable? It is in the spring that's perking outside.
Okay. When it's rain,
But there is water underneath the ground. That's where the spring is coming from.
But we're talking about here about the functional part.
That's right.
Even though,
That's what Moker is, functioning part.
even though the real source is underneath, we're talking about this because it's.
But it's not, it doesn't have that as its function. The function of the river, the water that's underneath the ground, is not to make a river.
It just happens. Spontaneous.
That's not its function. Its function is to have water underneath the ground for whatever reason.
So if
Then when it breaks through and it perks up into the surface and becomes a spring, that's when you can call it, oh, this is the source of this river. It's a mocker. Because that actually has in its design, what is this water about? This water is perk until it creates a river.
and now it's functioning as a river.
Now it becomes a river. You understand? The spring is the mocker of the river, and then it creates a river. If someone asks you, what is the mocker of this river? You'll say, oh, what's the question? There is water underneath the ground.
You have to say the sprout.
Yeah, that's not the mocker of the river is this spring.
So the same way here that. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay? Why? So this is all. Why? What is the point that we're trying to point out? That mokoir is properly applicable to something, to a state, not the original state where it's coming from, but the state of being that creates this. Okay, you understand that, right? So this is what we're saying, that the Shem Havaya, that the Rotzen, even though the original thing is the Rotzen, but the Rotzen cannot be called the Mokoir for the creation. Let us use a little bit more of a I want you to understand what the Rebbe is trying to explain over here. Mokoir. It's very important. This is the whole Indian can say that he's Talshalos. Remember we spoke about a picture hanging on the wall in a crooked way? Remember that? So immediately when you see it, you say, it's out of place. That's all it is, it's out of place. Doesn't fit your aesthetics, doesn't fit the way you would like it to be. It is a much further step down when you decide to say, okay, let's fix it. It's a completely separate level. How can you fix it? Is it fixable? That becomes already the source for moving it, straightening it out. Even though that when you're fixing it, what are you fixing it to? It should conform to your will. But the will is not the one that directed your action and directed your thought to fix it. The will only said, I don't like it. You understand? This element of going and fixing it and straightening it out That is on a completely different level.
So it's like a new thing.
Oh, this is what he's saying. It's a new thing, but it's not really a new thing.
Because we already have the.
Because we already have the rods in there.
But now, since you have the thing, how to fix it, how to go about it, this becomes
That's called the mokiv. And the reason for that, let's go to its details. The reason that the rotzen is not called a source for fixing it is that as far as the rotzen is concerned, the whole idea of fixing means that it could be crooked and you can fix it. From a rotzen perspective, it cannot be crooked. The rotzen only knows one way, the way it should be. The reason that it can be crooked is because it's hanging on the wall. Nothing to do with the picture. It's hanging on the wall, and on the wall it can hang crooked. This thing that it can hang crooked has nothing to do with the picture. You understand? It has to do with the wall that it's hanging on. Getting my point? The reality of the picture is that the picture has to be straight. But since you are putting the picture on the wall, so this is not the essence of the picture, this is putting the picture on the wall. Bump on the wall, it could be crooked. But not because the picture is crooked, but because as it hangs on the wall, it could be crooked. So that's nothing to do with the rods. Where is this whole phenomenon that it's hanging on the wall and can be fixed? That's much lower. That's at the level where you hang it up, where you're doing an action. Okay. So we're saying like this, that the real source, Iker HaMokor, the real source is Masha'Allah B'Tzayin, is the Rotz, because this is what feeds it, this is what gives it, just like we said in the case of the spring, of the river. The real resource, where is the water coming from? From the water underneath the ground. That's the real reservoir. But what becomes the source and the mocker for creating a river? That's a spring. And the spring is functionally related to a river.
There's a functional source and an actual source.
Right. A true source. Iker HaMokor.
And the makor for the spring, the Mayan, it's not called the makor. I mean, the Mayan also has a makor.
Right. Mayan has a mokor, that's the water flowing underneath the ground. And over there is a flow, as you said, there's a pressure.
No, but what is the makor of the Mayan?
And the water flowing underneath the river, underneath the earth.
And the makor of that? Under the ground, those water also have a makor.
That also has a mokor.
So that makor, that first makor can't be responsible altogether for everything. There has to be a makor for something.
That's right. Okay. That's what he says. Let's go back to the line, Kuli Yukidu, the Kasa Nikra Mokor. Did you see that? Kasa is Nikra Mokor. Elo, except, she'iev shel likres es bechinas horotzen haposhut hanal b'shem Mokor mamosh lo'ilus. Even though that is the real Mokor, because this is where it's coming from. But it's impossible to refer to the Rotzen HaPoshut as the Mokor Mamosh Loyalmus, is direct Mokor from the words. Why? The Mokor Mamosh, because what is called Mokor Mamosh, function, that's called functioning Mokor, hu sheba begilui, that is what comes begilui beoifen she'ef sheliyos mimenu his havas mamash. It is so begilui in such a manner that from this can actually come his havas, creation. Ukmei mayon shenikra mokel lenot, like the spring that's called a moker for the river. Harehu bo begilui. The spring is actually begilui, is actually revealed water on top of the earth, not underneath the earth. She'ef sheliyos mimenu mitzias hanor, from which the actual creation of the Noah can happen. Ukmoi kein lamailo, the similar thing is lamailo. The shame mokoir, that the term mokoir shayach loimar dafka is applicable only to be said kishe'ev liyos mimenu his havos, from which his havos can actually occur. If somebody makes a picture of a table, okay, so that picture becomes the source, the blueprint for the table that's eventually going to be built. But this designer of the table doesn't even have the skill to put a nail in wood. If he tried, he couldn't build it. You understand? So he's not a mocker mamash for the table. Who is a mocker mamash for the table? A carpenter who was trained to put a nail straight into a wood. Except when he builds a table, he builds it according to the blueprint of the design. So the blueprint is the Iker HaMokar, but not the Mokar Mamosh, because this didn't bring it about to happen. This cannot make it happen. A hammer with a nail can make it happen in the hand of a good carpenter. You understand? But a blueprint drawer cannot make it happen. So therefore he cannot be called a moker mamash. This is where we have these two madrigas, the rotzin and the tzimtzum and the hishavas bepoel. This is essentially the concept of Seder Hishtalshelus. We find it difficult to relate to this whole concept because if I think of that this dot should be here, I go and I pick it up and put it here. But we don't realize that this rotzin, that the bat should be here properly, and the action to move it are very far apart. They're in two different worlds. Just like when you wake up in the morning and you want to get up, between that and getting up is a different world. Right?
Feels different.
Huh?
Feels different.
It's a different world. It's a whole process that has to go through until you actually get up.
That's during the moving of tissue box. Usually. It feels
The
different.
tissue box is sometimes heavy.
same process.
Sometimes you want to get up and you think to yourself, I'm getting up, but you're still sitting laying down straight. Because this want to get up and the getting up are not in the same world, the same level. The rotzing has to be translated in seichel, not I want to get up, but I will get up, I have to get up, and make a decision to do it, and then picking up and doing it. Even though it all comes still from the rotzing. The actual action that makes you, that actually occurs when you do it is at a totally different level than the rotzing. And we sometimes wonder, I'm such a good person, I really want the best. What happens? This will, this very good intention gets lost on the way down to the action. This is why we say that in order to bring things into action, you have to have Kabbalah's oil. You have to have discipline. What are you disciplined for? I want the best. I need to discipline. I want a good person, I want the best. The answer is that this want will not bring about the action. They're two different words. It's not a mocker mamosh. It's mocker hiki, right? Olafi oy von giluyoi kahu ha'hizhavus. Okay, this is the conclusion of this line where you said that the mokoir is davke shayach to that from which the hizhavus can occur, can happen, and the manner in which this koyach of hizhavus is revealed. This is how the hizhavus takes place. So in the mashal, this would be like if the spring, perks, the perk of water. If it's a big perk of water, the river will be a fast flowing. If it's a small perk, it will be a small flow. Even though the reservoir below is unlimited. But the gili is what defines what's going to happen. V'hainu, and that applies. B'shem havaya the seder hishtalshus. This is where, in other words, this giluyoy, this is what takes place in Shem havaya the seder hishtalshus. In other words, the seder havaya, Shem havaya after the tzimtzum. Shekvar bo begilui, where the Havaya element is already begilui. It's already in expressed form. Bebchinas haora de haora. In this manner, what's called haora de haora, not in the etzim, but it is a haora of the etzim. Haora de haora. Should we discuss Ha'ora de Ha'ora again? Do you remember what we discussed Ha'ora?
Ha'ora de Ha'ora?
No, Ha'ora. We didn't discuss Ha'ora de Ha'ora in non-distinction per se. But even for Ha'ora.
It was in relation to the new creation.
Right. Ha'ora is the pshat, like if I want this box to be here, okay, and I stretch my hand out, pick it up, and start moving it, when I stretch my hand out, you can't tell what I'm going to do at all. Could be I want to pick up the box and move it here. Could be I want to move it. So I'm going to move it to someplace else. Or I just pick up, I scratch my forehead. You know what I'm saying? So it's not a direct reflection exactly of what the Rotzen is. It's related to it. The Rotzen is that it should be here, and in order to be, it should be here, it has to be moved.
So the steps in between.
So the steps in between, and these steps are not directly capturing the whole Rotzen. And ultimately, and like we said in case of the picture on the wall, the most of them from the box is difficult to see the wholesome Rotzen in this. The picture on the wall, I have a Rotzen, I want that it should be straight. It bothers me that it's not straight, right? So this is aesthetically something that's touching me. The moving it is not part of that Rotzen. You understand? The moving it is a translation of how am I going to fulfill this Rotzen. But it is on the Chitzoin is again level. The Rotzen is not that you should move it. The Rotzen is that it should be straight. But it is the ha'ora of this Rotzen. How do you make it? How do you make it straight? By moving it.
So would it be a type of tzimtzum?
Hmm?
Would it be like a? Would it be in a relationship? Like, is it like a type of tzimtzum on its own?
Right. It's a tzimtzum.
It is a type of. It's like there's the tzimtzum, or is it like it's part of one of the steps in the tzimtzum?
Only through a tzimtzum is it possible to have a ha'or.
Would we be able? Can we call that a tzimtzum? Like,
that itself is not a tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is like this. The person is looking at this picture and he's just wondering the beauty of the picture and is bothered by the fact that it's crooked. And he stays glued to that picture. Nothing's going to happen. He has to step away from this and figure out what's bothering me about it, which is not the actual experience. What's bothering me about it? Oh, it's crooked. Why is it crooked? You know what I'm saying? You have to be mitzamtzim, the initial sense of what bothers you, or what it is that you're looking at. Come down to a state where you're not really bothered, you're just understanding what it is that's bothering you. Then you're able to translate it in terms of action. Oh, but you need to do is straighten it out.
you can't just put it right away back straight. You have to wait to take all the proper steps in order for it to happen. And
That's
all
right.
those steps in between.
That's right. But even to identify the steps, you first have to distract yourself from the initial desire.
So, but like the ha'ara, it's like a symptom, like on its own, but a different definition, not the symptom.
Right. The ha'ara is created as a result of the tzimtzum. We discussed ha'ara, like the sunlight and the light and the chayes hanefesh. We discussed ha'ara at many levels. The sunlight brings light to the earth, but it's not the real sunlight. The sunlight is light be'etzem, it doesn't know darkness, but the light that comes to the earth is only light that makes it see in the darkness. It doesn't make the earth sun. It makes it lit up, visible, within the darkness. It's only the function element, the functioning aspect of light, not the essential aspect of light. Remember this is whole discussion. This is the ha'ara. The Shem Havayla comes after the Tzimtzum. This is the ha'ara of the original Shem Havayim, and therefore this can be instrumental in creating the world in the image of the original will. Okay. Yeah? You following through? You catching up with us a little bit? I can't expect much, but you're involved a little bit. Any little bit helps. Okay? And what is the ultimate his habus? What is his habus? The Hainu, the Ishavas is, or the Hamshocha, the Hamshocha is, Gili Hamshocha is, Ma Shebo Ha'oir, Begilui, Bebchinas, Oiris, V'kelim, B'asasviras Atzilus. It is the fact that the oil comes, so to speak, and it's translated begilui at the level of oiris v'kelim, b'shesfiras atzilus. Oiris v'kelim is all the things that we've been discussing in terms of functionality. This is called oiris v'kelim, oiris b'kelim. Like the Indian that remember we spoke about that a table is something which was created along with the human being. But because a human being functions with a table. And you want to sit and read something and learn or eat, whatever you do, a table is very useful. Not very useful. It's not only useful, this is how you do things. When you learn, you don't sit on your book, right? You sit beneath it and you learn from the book. This concept that you should be able to concentrate in what you're doing without being hampered by all the let's say if you have to hold a book in your hand and you have to stand, you can't concentrate the same way as when you're sitting and holding the book on the table. In other words, part and parcel of this element of learning is that you should be able to have the comforts that allow you to concentrate on the learning without any interference. So then you know that this is how you're supposed to do. So therefore, what do I do in order to facilitate that? I make a table. The table and learning are not the same thing. But this is a keli for that element, for that human element that you should be able to offload various things so that you can concentrate on one thing. You understand what I'm saying? The same thing is all the oiris v'kelim, like I say, oiris v'kelim of the spheres. If you remember, we said when you take a penny out of your pocket and you give it to a poor person, which is the act of chesed. which is the act of chesed. This act of chesed is only really the keli for chesed. The real chesed is what you recognize in your mind and your heart that you want to give chesed, to reveal chesed. Open up. And then, what is the means by which you do it? You put your hands in your pocket, take a penny out, and you give it. This penny that you give, and the whole action of taking it out and giving, is only motivated by the chesed, but it's not in itself the element of chesed. Because when you pay for when you pay for a bottle of water, you do exactly the same thing. You take a penny out of your pocket and you give it. That's not an act of chesed. You're paying for the water. So this is not a keli. A keli means that this is a means by which this oil is transmitted. But it in itself is not chesed. In order for chesed to be able to be translated in a keli, it has to be very much reduced and translated into some kind of a practical functioning action. Because chesed by itself, in a pure state, what is chesed? Chesed, by definition, is the principle of being open, unrestrained. You understand? Unrestrained. That's the pure chesed. To translate this and to reduce this essential inyan to be open and unrestrained, to bring in a keli has to go several steps, such as you have to be open and unrestrained. And how do you define that? It's not just I'm open, so I'll go in and run around and I jump and I throw things around. I take all my money and throw it around. That's not chesed, right? It has to be defined in terms of a purpose, in terms of what am I going to do with it? Who is going to be the beneficiary of this chesed? The initial chesed in the nefesh is just this unrestrained inyan. But in order to bring it out, bepoil, there has to be a beneficiary, it has to be planned. That is part of his talshus. Until it becomes translated. What is the chesed that you want to do? Now, to be a chesed is to give a penny to the owner. To somebody else, a chesed means to sit down and learn with somebody. Somebody else, it is to take him and to talk to him. This is all different elements of chesed coming from the same midah of chesed. So the midah, you understand, is mislabish in a keli, and then the keli can be translated in all kinds of different ways. Okay? So when the oil comes in oiles v'kelim, v'gam l'maylo me'atzilus, is gankim b'chinas kelim, so it's in parentheses, we're not going to go into that. U'b'seida v'hadroga, and then the oil comes b'chinas kelim, b'seida v'hadroga, in organized order and in a sequence, in a proper sequence. Bigdima v'yichur. what comes first and what comes second. This is all part of the ishtalshelus of the midas chesed, of the midah. This already has to do with midas havus. As a sphere of the atzilus, and then from these 10 spheres of atzilus, nizhavu as a sphere is the biyah. That resulted in as a sphere ad oil mazah gashmi, until that this as a sphere can be translated even in oil mazah gashmi. Oil mazah gashmi is the ultimate of his havus. Why? Because in Olam Hazeh HaGashmi, in Gashmius, you can hardly see the chesed element. And I want to discuss this briefly, and then we'll interrupt.
What's
Hadroga. Hadroga means gradual. Ordinary graduality.
In the parentheses?
In the parentheses is that there are kelim even l'mayla me'atzilus. But okay, this maybe sometimes.
Not relevant.
Not for now. I want to. Now it came down to ilm hazeh agashmi. I want to catch it, and then you see the ilm hazeh agashmi. We have a real challenge. We know that every person loves their children. A mother loves her children, to know it. So then come the psychologists. And they can begin to study what is the psychology, what's going on in the person's mind. Why does he love his child? And they, in analyzing this whole phenomenon, they start saying, you know what? There is a personal interest in that. And they begin, putting into the keli because the mother gets this from the child and this and that, until the whole element of the chesed, of the love element, is lost. You lose sense of the neshama element, of the oir, becomes only keli. It is true that when a mommy holds a baby and the baby is smiling, the mommy feels good. But that is only the keli. This is not the reason that the mommy loves the child, because the child smiles at him, at her. There's an inherent love. But because it's Olam Hazeh in Gashmius, and they are two separate people, the actual oir can be completely lost, completely, you lose consciousness, lose sense of it. But you see the keli. The keli for it is the various things that connect the two people. The same thing is friends. Friendship is a very principal in human beings, a very wonderful quality. When you start studying friendship, you find that there are all kinds of different elements involved, that people are actually getting benefit from the friendship. So therefore they can say, it's not friendship, it's for personal gain. But they don't understand that this benefit is only a keli for the real thing. It's not that they're doing it for the benefit. The benefit is the means by which the Oyer HaNefesh comes through. But really, there's real friendship. And when a person's alone, he's miserable. The way it is Lamaila, it's just the opposite. There is the Oyer HaNefesh, the Oyer HaChesed, the Oyer HaAhava. The Keli is minimal. It goes higher and higher and higher until the Atzilus, the Keli is also more like Oyer. And above that there is no Keli, just the Oyer. Even above Atzilus there's Keli, But there's a certain point where there's no Kelim. There's mamish the oil, mamish the truth itself. From that oil, this is, so to speak, the oil lifnei hatzimtzum. To bring this oil down to a point where it becomes lost in the keli, where it looks only keli, goes through a lot of seder ishtalshalos.
Just like the Kabbalah.
That's right. A lot of seder ishtalshalos. But nevertheless, the original oir is still rooted in that oir shel lifnei hatzimtzum. And in our terms, in the human terms, like we discussed now, the Moshel, the real source, the real force behind, say, friendship, is not any of these things that they gain. It's because a human being wants to have friends. Because he wants to relate to other people. It's originally in the Rotz. This is the Etz.
It's like having, if you had a robot serving you and acting like that, it would be empty. Benefiting you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Huh? All the midas are rooted in the Rotz. And we once explained that even Seichel is rooted in Rotz. Remember that? The reason we understand is because it's rooted in the Rotz. Seichel itself. But it takes a big Seder Hishtalshus, a big Tzimtzum, to bring it down to a point where it becomes a practical Seichel. Sasela.
What language is that?
French.
What is it?
Huh? Sasela. This is it.